Hey, welcome in, everyone, to College Football Coast to Coast. We've been going strong now for 19 weeks over on Pigskin Pete's channel, and now here at MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football. Pigskin, how you doing today?
What's up, Mark? I'm amazing and fantastic. I can't believe it's been 19 weeks.
That's how I counted it up. I
Yeah.
get a little bit confused at times, but I look back at the last few, and that's how we had them numbered up. 19 weeks. So keep it locked in here every week on my channel for the time being, and then we'll let you know when we're going to head back on over to Pigskin Pete's channel for college football talk. Yes, we didn't stop once the season stopped. We're here every Monday at noon Eastern time. Of course, keep in mind we got the Super Chat available to you, your individual contributions. Also, we would hope to get a sponsor. So that may seem a little bit out of your reach for you personally, but if you know of anyone who owns a business that may benefit from promoting here and sponsoring at our College Football Coast to Coast show, please let us know. Just hit me up at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. Len Henry, we agree with you. Great show. We appreciate it so much. Len contacted me the other day to say, hey, Mark, I can never catch the live stream, but this time I did. And Len's able to do it again here today. So we appreciate that.
Thank you, Len.
All right. Leave your comments, your questions, your debate topics, anything you'd like to ask Pigskin or myself, anything you'd like us to debate, leave it right there in the live chat, and we will certainly get to it. But we're going to start with this mess of a Tennessee coaching search, and it's not necessarily a mess right now, but based on past experience, Pigskin, maybe I'm just anticipating it to become one.
I don't know if I've ever seen a fan base more involved in the hiring of coaches than Tennessee and influencing the hiring of new head coaches. Obviously, we saw what happened with Greg Schiano, who's up there winning games at Rutgers now. Could have easily been the previous coach instead of Pruitt, but they ran him off. And some of the names that are coming up now, of course, Philip Fulmer retires. I don't know if he's forced into retirement, retired on his own. Either way, he's not there. They bring in this young guy, Danny White, who obviously his first order of business is getting the football program back to being somewhat respectable and looking for a new head coach. There's some interesting names. Obviously, Tony Elliott, offensive coordinator for Clemson. The rumor is that Danny White has said, maybe not publicly, but privately, that the job is Tony Elliott's if he wants it. Now, I personally don't believe he'll take the job, but it is. Let's face it, it's still a big time program. And based on what's happened there, he could probably get a lot of security in that contract. Make a lot of money. Certainly, it'd probably be a very lucrative deal for a first-time head coaching gig for him. I still happen to believe that he's probably not going to take it. The other big name that comes up is PJ Fleck. Sonny Dykes at SMU, and there's a connection there. So Danny White's sister is the assistant athletic director at SMU. So she has a relationship, obviously, currently with Sonny Dykes. I think that's probably more along the lines of what you're going to see as the next head coach is somebody like Sonny Dykes, and not necessarily a PJ Fleck or even a Tony Elliott.
Danny White's family is heavily involved in the hierarchy of various universities at his position and other positions, whether it be two of his brothers, one of who coaches at as a head men's basketball coach at the University of Florida, Mike White, and his other brother, can't think of his name right now, is also an athletic director somewhere. And as you mentioned, his sister has ties to SMU. As a pretty high-ranking official there in the athletic department. Danny White, most college football fans or college sports fans don't necessarily know who the ADs are at particular universities. They're not typically high-profile positions, depending on where you are. But Danny White's been a guy, because of what happened with the UCF football program a couple of years ago, in going undefeated 2 consecutive seasons, 25-game winning streak, before they finally lost to LSU in a bowl game, and him touting that 2017 team as a national champion gained a lot of attention, a lot of social media criticism and support, from both sides, for really standing up for his team and touting them as a national champion. And he kind of gained a lot of spotlight. So even before this this ascension to the Tennessee athletic director's job, Danny White was well known by a lot of college football fans.
Yeah, he did a great job. He also, I want to say he turned around the Buffalo athletic program too, if I'm not mistaken. So he's sort of a program rebuilding guy. That's what he's known for. He's got his work cut out for him here at Tennessee and I don't even know, this is why I think like people like PJ Fleck, is Tennessee a better job than Minnesota? I guess it is. It's in the SEC. But listen, the guy wins 10 or 2 years ago, he won 11 games, right, at Minnesota, which is pretty much unheard of. But do you really want to go down to take over a program that's in that situation when you're coaching a major Power 5 school and you're having some success, albeit at Minnesota still? I still think Minnesota's in a much better shape right now as an athletic department, and certainly as a football program, than Tennessee is. And then we don't even know what the NCAA is going to do as far as, like, is there going to be several years of a postseason ban? I mean, how long is this going to last, and how long of a rebuild is this before you jump into a career change like that?
Yeah, so to rate the Minnesota job versus the Tennessee job. So, a lot of Big Ten fans would take some offense to what you just said there, Pigskin. The first thing that came out of your mouth, it's the SEC. It's got to be a better job.
Well, it's Minnesota. It's not even necessarily, I'm not comparing them to Ohio State or Michigan. I mean, it is what it is.
So let's see. Tennessee's probably at the mid-tier of the SEC right now, to be kind.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about the football team. Obviously, we're just talking about the program. We're not talking about the particular team, because they would be much lower versus Minnesota. I'm just throwing it out there. I tend to agree with you that there are higher expectations, despite what's happened over the last 13 years. There are higher expectations at Tennessee, not just from their own fan base, but nationally, because there is still just more potential at Tennessee. You've got more talent there. There's a bigger stadium in Tennessee than Minnesota for a reason. There's more interest. There's more fan support. It's a rabid fan base, and it's a sleeping giant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's my point. Is the ceiling at Tennessee, if the program is steered in the right direction, is higher than the ceiling in Minnesota. I just think it is what it is. You may have an outlying year or so where Minnesota can make a run like they did a couple of years ago, but in the long run, Tennessee is, like you just said, I believe they are a sleeping giant. They're in the heart of recruiting country. We're surrounded by every 5 of the top 6 recruiting states in the entire country. They have a recent national championship in 1998. I know that seems like a long time ago to some of the younger viewers, but to me, people like me and you, Mark, the 1998 really wasn't that long ago. And let's face it, they are in the SEC East, which is the weaker of the two divisions. Yes, Georgia has taken over the crown, but it's not like in the West with Alabama. Alabama has to get through to A&M and LSU. I mean, who does Georgia really have to fight with right now? A one-and-done Florida team, which is what I consider last year's team to be. Basically, I don't consider Florida to be any real threat to Georgia in the next year or two. So Tennessee is ripe for the pickings if they can just get things in the right direction there.
Appreciate a lot of you jumping on the line here early with us. Again, it's noon Eastern time every Monday. Dominic, Nate, the Great, or the depressed Wolverine fan lately here. As in the last 5 years. Len, appreciate that. Lewis, Yakov 22 on the line. Mark and Pete might be the best sports duo on the World Wide Web. Haven't heard it called the World Wide Web in quite some time. Ballard, appreciate you being on here with us as well, and others. We will get to your comments and questions in just a second. So I was asked a number of times over the last, ever since this Jeremy Pruitt story broke and he was fired, how big is Tennessee? How big is the job? How good is the job? And my initial reaction was, it is one of the more odd, strange jobs to assess because of some of the things that you just stated and more. If you look across the country, you can pick out just about any job in the Power 5, throw it my way, and I'm going to be able to say that's a top 5 job, that's a top 10 job, that's a top 50 job, whatever it is. I can classify it pretty accurately with, I think, little debate. Tennessee, though, okay, On one hand, you've got what it's been the last 13 years, which is a mediocre marginal football product, and that's to be kind.
Mhm.
That's to be kind. It doesn't take much to reach a bowl game, and Tennessee struggles to make it to bowl games. They had two pretty good teams under Butch Jones back to back. 9-4 teams that finished in the top 15. Aside from that, rubbish. On the other side, and we're talking of 13, 14 years. This has been ongoing. On the other hand, stadium size that gets filled every week, fan base, money, resources, SEC. And on the better half of the SEC, if you want to compete for a championship, as you just outlined. And then on top of all that, we know what's happening in terms of the population. People are not moving to Minnesota. People are moving to Tennessee. Minneapolis might be a great place to live, some people think, but people are moving south and they're moving west. Therefore, from everything I understand, the quality of high school football in Tennessee was never that great, but it's getting better and better and better and better. Nashville is exploding, and just the sheer population. I don't know that they're really addressing high school football like the state is trying to make it better or pumping money into it. I just think its sheer population growth has made it better. So it's still not Georgia, Louisiana, Florida, of course, but it's improved considerably. And again, to Pigskin's point, Tennessee's right there close to those adjoining states to pluck that talent.
And that's why I think PJ Fleck is such an interesting fit for this. I tend to just don't think it's a good fit because he's a Midwest guy. It just doesn't seem like he'd fit the culture of Tennessee very well. But having said that, he could take the literal row the boat mantra that he has. I mean, the Tennessee River runs right through Knoxville. So he could actually physically be rowing this boat through Knoxville. And I think that they'd be lucky to get a guy as good as PJ Fleck in there. If you notice, and all fans do this, but I think the expectation for who should take this coaching job or who should be offered this coaching job by Tennessee fans is way out of the stratosphere. For instance, and I know if you go on social media, Twitter, Facebook, what have you, it's filled with a bunch of idiots to say stupid things to get attention or whatever it is. But I see a lot of backlash when talking about the offensive coordinator for Clemson, Tony Elliott, being offered this job from the Tennessee fans. They feel like that they're too good to hire, to offer a job to somebody who's never been a head coach before. Look at what you've had in the past two, at least the past two coaches, and Butch Jones and then Jeremy Pruitt. And now you're too good for Tony Elliott. I got news for you. I have a feeling that Tony Elliott will turn your job down because it's probably not good enough for him. It's the other way around. So they need to adjust their expectations a little bit. I think PJ Fleck would be a home run hire. I can't think of somebody who's a better coach that would even entertain taking that job.
Yeah, you're right. Every fan base over evaluates their head coaching position. So, Urban Meyer's been tagged by ever since he stepped down at Ohio State. And before that at Florida, he was the number one target of every fan base when it was really only legitimate for Texas and USC fans to say, hey, we want Urban Meyer. But I heard like South Carolina fans saying we want Urban Meyer. And then we've got a similar situation here with Tennessee. Although Tony Elliott, I don't know what he's shooting for. I don't know how well respected he is. I have an idea. You've got a much better idea how well respected Tony Elliott is. But if he's going to turn down Tennessee,
I mean, he's turned down stuff before. He got 2 or 3 calls just this offseason from NFL teams wanting him to either interview for a head coaching job or for offensive coordinator job, turn them all down. Said basically, I'm just not ready to leave Clemson yet. So I think that's one thing. I think he's, as far as what job is he waiting on? I mean, maybe one where you're not under investigation by the NCAA. I mean, maybe you go to a program that just had a bad year or two on the field, but they don't have all these behind the scenes problems. I don't know. People often wonder what keeps these coordinators, Brent Venables, Tony Elliott, staying at Clemson when they could clearly move on and be a head coach for a major college football program. I think the answer is the grass isn't always greener on the other side, and they understand that. They're very comfortable where they are. They like winning. The cupboard on the offensive side of the football at Clemson is not bare. Go to Tennessee, it is bare. So sometimes the players that you have at your disposal can make you look a lot better as a candidate than other ones. So,
yeah. So the thing that these coaches or ADs have an advantage of in evaluating these jobs would be that they know people. So you can imagine who Tony Elliott knows. He can pick up the phone, he can text all sorts of people and say, what's the deal at Tennessee? What am I getting into? He can text about Danny White and say, what kind of guy is this? I'm sure he's got all kinds of connections. So we look at what's the prestige of the program? What are the facilities like? The recruiting footprint? How much money are they going to make? Can they win there? And all that is certainly the bullet points of what you go through. But in terms of a mess like Tennessee, I wouldn't mind going into a mess like Tennessee if I knew I was going to get the support, if I trusted the AD and believed that they were the right person to help me through that, and that they were going to give me the time. If anything, you've got a bit of a leeway, of a path, of a grace period to say, we understand it's not going to be pretty for a few years. It would almost be the kind of situation, as long as, again, I trusted the administration and the AD and thought that they were capable and trustworthy and competent to help me through it, to say, I could be a hero here. You could look at it that way too.
Yeah, there's something to be said for that. You're right. I think there will obviously be more patience. What Pruitt was there for 3 years, and let's be real. Who knows how this is going to end up with Pruitt? They're trying not to pay him his buyout. He's suing the university for defamation and trying to receive his payment. I think that them not paying Pruitt his payout is going to end up hurting Tennessee. They would have better off just paying him and telling him to go away, and that would be the end of it. But now what he's going to do, and his lawyers in particular, are going to drag the university's name through the mud to try to retrieve their payment. And they'll probably succeed in doing so. So this just stretches out this already big mess even longer. And I think that also hurts in the coaching hire. Because do you want to be a guy like PJ Fleck? Do you want to be a guy like Tony Elliott? Do you want to be a guy like Sonny Dykes and put your reputation on the line where there has not been a simpatico relationship between university and head coach for several hires now?
Got our first question of the day coming from Dominic, and it's not even a hockey question. So Dominic asks, who do you think will win the Super Bowl, Kansas City or Tampa Bay? So, of course, this is college football coast to coast, but we're football fans, and I would think most people out there are NFL fans as well. So, Pigskin, what do you think of the championship games yesterday in Super Bowl 55?
I think the matchup is interesting because it's the Chiefs, right? And it's Tom Brady. Let's forget the Buccaneers uniform. Let's just say what it is. It's about Tom Brady and his legacy at this point. But don't take my advice on these NFL games, because I was 0 for 2 yesterday. There was only 2 games and I was 0 for 2. I picked the Bills to beat the Chiefs, and I picked the Green Bay Packers to beat the Buccaneers. So I was 0 for on that. So I don't know. I want to say the Chiefs are clearly the better team. They've been the best team in football for a couple of years running now. But look at Tom Brady's postseason record for the last 20 years is impeccable. So never, ever, ever count Brady out in a Super Bowl situation.
I picked NFL games forever. Meaning like 1979, I started picking NFL games. So I've been doing it forever. And then about 2 years ago, I just forgot to do it. Like the first Sunday of the season, I forgot to do it. And I just stopped ever since. So I haven't picked the games for the last 2 years, I think it's been. I would have picked Green Bay and Kansas City. What was the line on the Bills and Chiefs? I would think that you were picking a pretty substantial upset there.
It was 3 points.
Really?
Yeah.
Because of Mahomes' uncertainty.
Yes.
I guess.
I think so, yeah.
Man, I would have thought the Chiefs would have been at least a touchdown favorite.
Yeah, and Green Bay was a 3.5 point favorite over the Bucks. So
I got to say that I like Aaron Rodgers. I don't dislike Tom Brady. I don't like him. I don't dislike him. He's pretty neutral in my book, but he's won enough, and I think he gets rather fortunate. I'm not disclaiming his greatness. I'm not going to necessarily call him the GOAT because I think there are two different GOAT categories. I think he is the GOAT of accomplishments. Is he the greatest quarterback of all time? I'm not going to say that. I'm going to say he's achieved the most. His teams have achieved the most. There's no question about that. Going to 10 Super Bowls. Has he been largely responsible for it? Well, of course, he's the quarterback. The first one, he wasn't that responsible for. He threw for 140 yards in the Super Bowl. This past one, he did not play well yesterday. He threw 3 picks on 3 consecutive possessions. Rodgers played a much better game. His team fell apart around him. I think Brady got fortunate. He wouldn't have gone to the last Super Bowl if Dee Ford wouldn't have been standing off sides. He threw an interception that lost the game in Kansas City. So I think he's been rather fortunate. I could go through more, but you can't argue with 10 Super Bowl appearances and going for 7 wins. And for anybody who calls him the GOAT, I have no response to that because it's obvious that if you just base it on a combination of winning and statistics, he's the GOAT. But
Yeah.
I just don't like the whole quarterback record, and then we don't assign a record to any other player on the field. I think it's kind of stupid.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. However, I mean, if you don't judge by Super Bowl rings, what is the measurement, right? I mean, in golf, you measure by major championships. It's same with tennis. I don't know why football would be really any different. And the real question was for many, many years was who was more responsible for the success of the Patriots? Was it Bill Belichick or was it Tom Brady? Well, now we've seen Tom Brady remove himself from the Patriots organization. He's back in the Super Bowl the very next year, and Belichick didn't even make the playoffs. Now, I'm not saying that just means that Tom Brady was the mastermind behind all that winning in New England, but it certainly does appear that way now at the present moment.
Well, when they acquired Tom Brady in Tampa, they certainly went to great measures to surround him with talent, though.
They're ridiculous roster in Tampa Bay. Yeah.
So he didn't land at the worst place.
No. That's what I said whenever they brought him on down there and they started signing, Gronkowski and Leonard Fournette, and then they went out and got Antonio Brown, who didn't play yesterday, but I told a buddy of mine, Slim Shady Canes, who's on these chat sections. He's a huge Buccaneers fan. And I said, look, you got a 2-year window here, man. They're trying to buy a Super Bowl or 2, and they may succeed at doing it. But I put the window at 2 years because eventually Tom Brady's going to hit a wall, and just sort of like what we saw happen with Drew Brees this year. He's a shell of his former self. It's going to happen. All right. Tom Brady still looks decent, but he's certainly regressing from year to year, just by virtue of getting older. So this is your 2-year window. You have this year and maybe next year. The salary cap is a major issue. So I think you have a 2-year window to win one or multiple Super Bowls with Brady, and then the Bucs are going to slide massively because of free agency mainly.
And basically, the distinction I make between football and tennis and golf is the obvious, that the tennis player and the golfer go out there by themselves, and they're completely responsible for the win or loss.
Sure.
So I'm not real high on that. I don't mind the quarterback record because I think it's part of the evaluation. But I would like to see a record for offensive linemen and running back. Everybody gets a record. What is your team's record in the games that you played? I'd like to see that for everyone.
He's certainly not the most talented quarterback of all time, but not even close. I mean, just look at some of the guys that came before him, or a bunch of them: Joe Montana, Dan Marino, John Elway. These guys were all way more talented than Tom Brady ever was. But they don't have the championships, or at least most of them don't have the amount of championships that Brady has required.
Yeah, it's an amazing career. There's no question about that. I would not try to debate that in any such way. I know that I'm climbing an uphill battle when I to argue anybody else as the greatest of all time.
Plus, I'm sure you get you just don't like him because he's a Michigan man, Mark. I'm sure you get that, don't you?
I do.
Yeah, of course.
And that really just doesn't factor into my rate.
Yeah,
Actually, living where I live for the last 19 years, which is I'm about 2 hours from Boston, and basically because there are no professional sports teams in the state of Connecticut, that everybody latches on to the New York and Boston teams. I've just gotten sick of the Patriots like most of the
yeah.
nation has. So that's part of it. I'm biased. I will admit I am biased and can be more so in the NFL because I don't have a YouTube channel and don't have to talk about it. So I can be rooting as much as I can, and I did for the Packers yesterday, but didn't happen. Ronan, Pete, if Elliott did leave for another job, how big of an impact do you think it has on Clemson, if any, considering you rarely lose coaches?
It's a good question, man, because obviously it matters. I know the outcome of the Ohio State game, Sugar Bowl, would not have been different had Tony Elliott been there, but the score may have been a little bit different. He showed his value considerably by not playing in that or coaching in that game, being the signal caller. I think it would be a considerable loss for Clemson to lose Tony Elliott, the same way I think it would be a considerable loss for them to lose Brent Venables, but it's the health of the program that matters. So if people remember back when Chad Morris came into Clemson and sort of transformed the offense from a very pedestrian, mediocre type of offense to one of the, highest flying, fastest running offenses in the country almost overnight. He stays there for a few years, leaves to take the head coaching job at SMU. And of course, we heard a lot of that then as Clemson fans. Oh, your mastermind behind your offense is gone. Clemson's offense is going to look terrible. Meanwhile, they plugged in Scott and Elliott right in there, and they didn't look back. They actually got better offensively than they were under Morris. So I think that as long as Dabo Sweeney's there, he's the glue that holds this whole thing together. He has a philosophy of the type of offense that he wants to run at Clemson, and he'll go get a coach, whether it's a current coach on the coaching staff, which is typically the way he does things. They don't go outside looking for coaches very often. They went outside and got Venables from the outside, but really they like to promote from within for coordinator positions. So certainly it would hurt, but I don't think it would be the death nail to the offense or the program by any stretch.
And at the time that they brought in Venables, obviously they were just building what Dabo Sweeney envisioned. So he had to go get top-notch guys, as opposed to right now, they've got it. They've got their system built. Dabo probably trusts the way that they're grooming people, so he would want to elevate people within the system.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like a snowball. The program gains speed and it starts to become self-sustainable just because of the way the programs run. You see the same thing. I mean, look at Alabama. I'm not saying Clemson's Alabama. Clearly, they're not, but they're pretty damn close program-wise. And it seems to me it's virtually every single year that Nick Saban loses a coordinator, and they don't seem to have much of a drop-off, if any at all. So it's because Alabama's program is, healthy. That's all. That's all that matters.
Texas A&M fan. A&M is about to sign their best class ever in 2022. It's just a matter of time until everyone realizes that the SEC is better. I think that came off the discussion about, the SEC and the Big Ten and so forth and so on. I will go on record here, as I've gone on record many, many times, saying that I believe the SEC is the best conference. I believe that it's generally been the best conference for about 20 years. Now, there might be a year or two in there. I debated this with somebody recently that the SEC was not the best conference for that specific year, but overall has been the best conference for 20 some years. I think that's obvious by the recruiting rankings, the NFL draft. So you're basically taking the talent coming into the programs from high school football. That's the best by all the measurements. And then 3 to 4 years later, it's showing itself to be the best by the NFL draft statistics. And then in between, obviously, the results on the field mean more than anything. And the SEC has the best record. Is it flawless? Is it impeccable? No, they lose big games. They lose bowl games. They lose non-conference matchups. And they lose some embarrassing games. Arkansas and Tennessee and others have lost some embarrassing matchups. Missouri went out to Wyoming last year and lost. So the conference isn't perfect, but I would say it's the best. Now, 2 through 5, though, I don't know if you get into these arguments or you care about the rest of the conferences and where they rank, but do you have any thoughts about that?
I mean, I think it changes year to year. I think it's the SEC probably most consistently is the toughest conference in football. I think the bottom three is, the Big 12, and I say the bottom three subjectively, clearly. I'm not saying they're terrible conferences or anything, but the ACC, the Pac-12, the Big 12. And those seem to rotate in and out who's a better conference from year to year. And I think most years the Big 10 and the SEC are just stronger from top to bottom. Texas A&M fan, the guy who just asked that question, he left a comment earlier that I didn't answer. And he said, he was asking me, do I think that Jimbo Fisher would entertain leaving A&M to take the Tennessee job? And the answer to that is absolutely not. A&M is a way better job than Tennessee right now. So no, I don't think there's any chance that would happen.
No, there's just no reason to do that. First
Right.
of all, he's making a ton of money and he's got everything going well. He just has to get by Alabama. And that's not a simple statement that I'm making there. I get it, but
A&M's in a good spot. Tennessee is not. So, that's not a move I'd see anybody making.
Got George in here tearing things up as he typically does. Good to see everybody on the line. We got 63 on the line here. And again, if you've got any contacts for sponsors, let me know at MarkRogersTV at Gmail. We would love to get college football coast to coast sponsored so we can go forward with this without any interruption. Pigskin, there's always a lot to talk about in the off season. People ask me all the time, they're like, college football is over. What are you going to talk about? And I'm like, in some ways, there's even more to talk about. But this off season in particular, with this transfer portal pumping out names every day that can grab your attention, it's pretty crazy. Excuse me. I don't know what's going on the Clemson front, if they're doing much. I think you made the comment to me a couple of weeks ago that Dabo was kind of warding off the transfer portal.
Well, he's never used it before. As far as I know, there's only been one player since 2009, his first full season as head coach at Clemson. He's only taken in one transfer. They've always had a rule that they will not even entertain taking junior college transfers. But even outside of junior college, they haven't had anybody transfer in the past 8 or 9 years. So I think that there's a reason for this. Now, it's a philosophical reason with Dabo Swinney is I don't want to bring in a guy from another school and be forced to start him over a guy who's committed to the program, has been here working his tail off already for Clemson for the past 2 or 3 seasons. And just, we're going to kick the guy who's committed to the side for the new guy that came in from Tennessee or LSU because they're a better football player. And that's sort of the way he's looked at it. He also did say that things are changing in college football and the transfer portal at this point has become basically an open recruitment. It's not much different than going and signing a guy out of high school. So if you have a position of need, and every team has a position, at least 1 or 2 positions of need, whether it's for a starting job or even just to create depth, then it's foolish not to at least monitor the portal. And if there's a guy or 2 every year in there, maybe some 1 year there's no guys that you want to bring in, but maybe 1 year there is a guy, or maybe 1 year there's 2 guys. I think you're putting yourself at a disadvantage in today's modern college football by not even entertaining the transfer portal. Look at the recent national champions, Joe Burrow. Now I realize he was a graduate, wasn't he?
Yes.
Yeah. So, but Clemson doesn't take graduate transfers, so they wouldn't have gotten Joe Burrow if Dabo Swinney was the head coach at LSU. Justin Fields, clearly, going to Ohio State. That's just to name a couple of the bigger names. But there's guys, Derek King down at Miami, basically completely transformed that offense with just adding that one guy from the transfer portal. They just brought in another guy. wide receiver from Oklahoma, who's going to I think, have a big impact for them next year. So it's foolish to not to entertain it. And Sweeney did just make some changes on the coaching staff, not necessarily hiring and firing guys, but just moving them around, giving them different titles. And there is a guy that he has put in charge of monitoring the transfer portal. So I'm optimistic that we may start entertaining getting some transfers here in the near future.
Speaking of De'Aaron King, of course, yes, he was a big target and a huge transfer that really bolstered the Miami offense from one of the worst in the nation. They were bottom 5 to 10 in the nation in third down conversions, red zone efficiency, all those things, to a high-flying offense. Not great offense, but really good offense, a top 25 or 30 offense in the country. He got hurt against Oklahoma State in the bowl game. His prognosis is going to be very close to game 1 against Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
And N'Kosi Perry hit the transfer portal, pulled his name back from being in the transfer portal, and I don't necessarily know what his status is. I had a Miami guy on the other day that said even though he's coming back to the school, that he's not going to play for the team. So they could be trotting out an extremely young quarterback, inexperienced quarterback against Alabama in week 1.
Wait, so you're saying that he's coming back to get his degree but not play football?
Yeah, I need to clarify that because that didn't
sound right to me.
Yeah, I think he's a guy that wants to play football and maybe has an opportunity at the next level, even though he's not a great quarterback. He could be a third stringer in the NFL. Who knows?
Yeah.
So anyway, N'Kosi Perry could be the starting quarterback for Miami in week 1 against Alabama. I just went that direction because you brought up King, and it's my thought about Miami. I'm going to be very interested to see what happens in the next couple of years because I don't know if that they were improved because they're developing players better and they're truly better, or they just made 3 key additions, and that's offensive coordinator. Rhett Lashley's a really good play caller. De'Aaron King's the best quarterback they've had in 15 years or more. Yeah. And they actually got a kicker who can make the kicks, and they were missing most of them the year before, and they got the guy that was voted the best kicker in the country.
Yeah.
So I don't know if they've really improved as a program or they just made out in 3 positions.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a clear-cut difference between teams that build basically their entire roster off of the transfer portal, and they're sort of one-and-done guys, a lot of them. Just, they come play for 1 year, and then they're off to the NFL or just out of school, out of eligibility, whatever the case may be. And teams that are selective with the guys that they bring in, right? It's hard to pass up on a Justin Fields, especially if you don't have somebody there that's already at his level, right? I mean, he could pretty much pick anywhere school he wanted to. Would Justin Fields have come to Clemson? No, because we had Trevor Lawrence there already. But Ohio State didn't have a Trevor Lawrence at the time, and they utilized that and went out and got it, and it made a huge difference in a couple of seasons that he played there. So the other thing that's going to be interesting this offseason, Mark, you talked about not necessarily a lot to talk about. We have a situation this season that we've never had before with the waiving of the eligibility, the extra year eligibility, along with the transfer portal, is going to make this season even more interesting. We've seen it. We've already had a couple at Clemson, and I'm sure you're going to see those in every team. Guys coming back for their 6th year at a university. You're talking about guys that are going to be 24 and 25 years old playing in their 6th year of eligibility, and how I believe that they are going to expand the amount of scholarships available because of the eligibility rule. So all of these things are something we haven't really had to pay attention to before that make a huge difference for some of these teams, whether, depending on who comes back and who doesn't.
Yeah, last week we just hit the deadline for announcing early entry into the NFL draft, and I think the number was 131 players, but that's pretty typical of players opting early to go into the NFL draft. Obviously, what you're talking about is a whole other side of that, a player taking that opportunity to grab that extra year of eligibility. I would think, I can't verify this, but I would think that would have less of an impact at schools like Clemson and Ohio State because they're top end talent. They've got so much talent on the roster. Their issue is guys leaving. And then the guys that have fulfilled, not that they won't have extra year eligibility guys that'll want to come back and prepare themselves for the NFL or just want to play another year of college football and play for a championship and then move on to another vocation. But I would think that it would help those mid-tier teams that have less NFL talent on their roster, but they can keep really experienced guys around for an extra year. I can't verify that, but that's my theory.
Yeah, I think there's some legitimacy to that. Now, the other thing is that guys are using their extra year of eligibility to transfer out and not even necessarily stay where they are. We saw that with Niles Pinkney from Clemson. He got a free year basically this year. He transferred out to Minnesota, of all places, defensive tackle, and he was a 4-year starter for Clemson. And also Jordan Williams, he ended up landing at Virginia Tech. So some of these teams are going to be getting players from another school that are playing their 6th year instead of them staying at their alma mater.
Texas A&M fans having some fun because his team, of course, didn't make the playoff, so he can talk about what his team would have done in the playoff had they been in the playoff, but saying that Clemson had no business in the college football playoff. They and Ohio State are living on their past reputation. So Ohio State was undefeated. I don't know how they're living on past reputation. Clemson lost 1 game and then avenged that loss, a game where they were missing their starting quarterback and 3 key defensive starters on the road, and then avenged that loss by crushing the team that beat them. So I don't know how they're really living on reputation when they went 17-1 between the two of them.
Well, here's what I would ask guys like him that say things like that. There's 4 teams that are allowed into the playoffs every year. So you tell me, excluding Clemson and Ohio State, which 4 teams should have been in the playoffs?
Clearly Texas A&M.
Discussion there. And I guarantee you can't come up with a viable 2 teams other than Clemson and Ohio State.
I'm working on a series right now where I went through the college football playoff era, and I'm throwing out the 8-team playoff and the 16-team playoff. So the 8-team playoff in 2 models. One would be the one that seems to be most people's preference, which would be the 5 Power 5 champions, the 2 wild cards, and the 1 group of 5. And then I'm also just going through the college football playoff rankings. So let's say we had the same committee, we did the same exact thing, but we just went their first 8. So I'm saying this is what the playoff would look like with this model of the 5 champions, the 2 wild cards, and the 1 group of 5. Here's what it would have looked like for the past 7 years with the just 1 through 8 rankings. And then I'm now going through the 16 teams going, we're going to really let the group of 5 go wild and get all their champions in here, all 10 champions with the 6 wild cards versus what the college football playoff rankings. If you go with the college football playoff rankings, which I'm more in favor of allowing the group of 5 and honoring the conference championships and all that. But I will admit, if you go through what the 16-team playoff would look like during the college football playoff era, if you just went with the playoff rankings, you get all the name brand teams. You get all the teams people want to see. You start to include Georgia every year and Florida and Penn State. And, you get just powerhouse brand names and they make for fun matchups. I'll say that.
Well, I've been sort of not a big fan of expansion. I'm coming around to it. Okay. The main thing with me is I don't even mind the idea of giving 8 teams a chance to play. Maybe you get hot at the end of the season and you can win 3 games in a row and be a national champion. That's great. I don't want to diminish the importance of every game in the regular season. That's the hill that I've been, dying on for the past several years. However, I'm opening up to the idea of the 8 team. I really don't want to do the 12, the 16 game team model. 8, I think, is maybe a sweet spot there. And another reason I'm open to it now is to kind of prove that I was right the whole time. That I don't think maybe 9 out of every 10 years you're not going to see a different champion than you would have if it was only 4 teams. Maybe there is that outlying year once a decade where somebody like a Cincinnati or just throwing a name out there gets hot at the end of the season and beats 3 powerhouse teams and wins a national champion. But outside of a very outlying situation, I don't think you're going to see a different champion. I think Alabama wins the national championship in 2020, regardless of how many teams are in the playoff.
So not that Clemson would have lost any of these games, but these would have been interesting matchups. This is who Clemson would have played the last 3 years, 2020, 19, 18, had that we just gone with the college football playoff rankings, which I do not propose or support in any way. I don't like 13 people going into a closed room telling us who the best teams in the country are. But in terms of anybody could come up with good matchups if you're just taking all the brand names in college football. Clemson would have played in all three would have basically been 2-15 games or 3-14 games in terms of seedings. They would have played Iowa, Michigan, and Texas the last 3 years in the first round. They wouldn't have lost those games, but they would have been like another brand name, big time team, big conference team.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. It's fun, right? It's fun to see Clemson play against the Texas or Iowa, right? Because there's just games you don't see.
Yeah, that too.
But I get all that. But again, there's a fine line here, Mark, where I don't want to see a team that's undefeated going into the AC. Let's use Clemson as an example. Yep. Clemson is undefeated throughout the regular season. They're marching into Charlotte to play in the ACC championship as an undefeated team. We know no matter what happens in the ACC championship game, they are in because there's 8 teams or 10 teams or whatever the case is. What's the reason for them to play Trevor Lawrence and Travis Etienne and their best defensive starters? Because they might get hurt. Let's start preparing for the playoffs instead of worrying about this stupid ACC trophy. And it could diminish the conference championship games. And that's what I do not want to happen.
You don't want to see the NFL the last 2 weeks of the season where the 13-1 and 14-0 teams are sitting starters because they don't need to win. Yep, I get it. I do think that a lot of people's the scenario that you bring up is certainly possible under the formats that I support, but it would be much more limited based on other people's hesitancy if you would do it my way. And let's say Auburn's 10-1 and they're playing Alabama the last game of the season and they figure we're in the playoff anyway. That might be a bad example, but anyway, a 10-1 type football team. If you make a home field advantage the goal, do you want to play in Gainesville at home, or do you want to go to Madison, Wisconsin and take on Wisconsin in Camp Randall Stadium at the end of December? There's your incentive to win this game.
Yeah, so there's certainly ways you could fix that potential problem, sure. I don't know that the problem with college football is that it takes forever to get anything to change. We talked about the playoffs for how long? How long was the playoffs discussed before it actually happened, Mark? 30 years or more, maybe.
So people have asked me, and I love when they ask me this question because I can go back to my junior or senior year of high school in 1984. I wrote a paper in school. Here's your 16-team playoff for college football. And you can imagine back then people were like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
But yeah, so I was proposing a playoff way back then. So here are Clemson's first round opponents if we went with the 16-team model where we include all the group of 5 teams.
Okay.
So these are the conference champions. So again, these are not going to be good matchups most of the time, but it's going to be, for me at least, intriguing when one of them pulls a shocker or at least a scare in the fourth quarter. So in 2020, they would have played, well, we don't know because they would have played in my format the winner of the Sun Belt, and there was no Sun Belt Conference Championship game. Or Conference USA, I'm sorry. It would have either been Marshall or UAB. They would have played this season. Last season in 2019, they would have played Appalachian State. And then the season before, I believe it was 2018, Clemson would have played UAB.
See, no offense to any of these group of 5 teams, but see those matchups that you just mentioned there, Appalachian State, UAB, those don't really get the heart going for me.
I understand that. I totally get that. But I think there needs to be a decision made. You're either including the group of 5 or you're not including them. one or the other?
I'm going to tell you where I stand on that. I'd say don't include them. I'm one of these people that really believes that the group of five should have their own playoffs. And I would be all in on watching that too. I think it would be a great system, whether they did a similar format to what the Power Five teams are doing, or if they took more of the FCS model, or however they wanted to do it. I would be all in on watching the group of five playoffs. I think they would be entertaining.
Oh, I think it would be entertaining too. I don't know what kind of an impact it would have on recruiting. I don't know if it would not have an impact or it would improve it, or those players would think, you know what, instead of going to play for Cincinnati, even though I'm not going to win a championship, I'm going to go play for Illinois, because there's some kind of a stigma on you have no shot at playing for a national championship, because you know that's going to be looked upon as the national championship, of course, and the group of five championship is going to be the group of five championship.
Yeah, right. I'm not, you know what, it'd be an interesting case study to see how that would affect a kid's decision, whether he went to a team that like Illinois that doesn't really have a chance on any given year to compete for a national championship, or go to a Appalachian State, a UCF, something like that, and be able to play for a national championship, albeit not the college football playoff national championship, but a group of five national championship nonetheless. I think the TV ratings for a group of five national championship would be pretty darn good. So that you would certainly offer some national exposure to some of these guys that typically wouldn't get so much attention.
I think it would too. Over the last 5-10 years, we would have a lot of Cincinnati against Boise State and Memphis against Houston and whomever else would be involved. Yeah. It would be fun to watch.
It would be.
And I would think for them serving their own purposes, we would have a lot of Friday, Saturday national championship Power Five games, and then they might be playing a lot of Wednesday and Thursday games. It'd be kind of the, the appetizer for the week.
And we can't get enough of that. The college football season is so short and in relation to all the other major sports, especially professional sports, that you can't give us enough college football during those 4 months. So even if there's college football on every day of the week, I'm all for it.
No question about that. It is the shortest season by far. It's not even close.
Right.
Lewis Papp, thank you for reminding everyone to hit the like button. And we're here every Monday at noon Eastern time with Big Skin Pete talking college football and college football coast to coast. Anything else in here?
I've seen a lot of some arguing between Clemson and Georgia fans. Of course, that is the marquee matchup, week 1 of 2021, which I will be there along with some other people you guys might know. Uncle Lou's going. And we want a bunch of people to go, actually. I'm assuming that's going to be, well, the game's on Saturday, so the kickoff game is usually on Thursday. So I wonder what the kickoff game will be. I'm sure they've announced it already. It's got to be, is that Alabama and Miami? Is that the kickoff game?
So wait a minute. The Clemson Georgia game is being played in Atlanta.
No, it's being played in Charlotte. So I believe the Miami and Alabama game's being played in Atlanta. That will be the Chick-fil-A kickoff classic or whatever the hell they call it. I don't know what they call it now.
Yeah, to where they usually play 2 games. They play one on a Saturday and then Monday. The other one's like Ole Miss and Louisville.
They don't do one on Thursday to start the season before the main slate. So wholesome ones in here. What's up, man? How you doing, by the way? He says Miami versus Alabama is in Atlanta, and I guess that's the kickoff game. Anyway, the Clemson and Georgia game is on September 4th, Saturday, which is the first full week of games, I think. The first full Saturday of games.
I don't think the loser of that game is going to be hurt much as long as the winner continues to do what they're supposed to do, as long as it's a close game.
Right. I 100% agree. And you'd rather have, no matter which team loses, you'd rather have that loss week 1 than week 11. When it's fresh on the playoff committee's mind. They're supposed to not look at it that way, but I feel like that they do. There is a lot of recency bias in the playoff committee room. So, like you said, as long as it's not a blowout on either end, I don't think it really hurts either team.
So yes, Alabama, Miami on a Monday. I believe the Saturday game in Atlanta is Louisville and Ole Miss.
Okay.
Man, that's a tough one for the Canes to deal with. I know that Alabama's losing a ton of talent, but we know what that looks like. It doesn't really matter. It
Who
has
does Ohio State open the season with? Is it Oregon?
They've got Oregon.
And
It was a week 2 game originally, so I don't know what they've scheduled it for this year.
Okay. Yeah, I remember they canceled it because of Oregon's, the Pac-12 situation. And that game was supposed to be in Eugene, was it not? And
exactly.
But I believe this next season the game's going to be in Columbus, right? It was a home.
They're going to stick with the schedule. So that's something that hasn't really been addressed, that at least in public, where we've heard what's happened, all these games from 2020. So in that case, they're skipping 2020. They're going straight to the 2021 schedule to keep everything in line. And then I would guess that they're going to determine where they can fit in the game in Eugene.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, I'm confident, Mark, that we're not going to have a repeat of this year as far as COVID is concerned, and the shortened season, and basically, and Notre Dame taking full advantage of the weak leadership of the ACC, which almost ended up backfiring on the ACC. Quite frankly, imagine if Notre Dame had won the ACC, that would have backfired completely on John Swofford. But it didn't. Clemson kind of swooped in and saved the day, and then the rest is history. But I'm confident we're going to have a full season, Mark, with full attendance in the stands, right? That's important too. It's going to be weird watching a game where there's a packed house, right?
Yeah, no piped in crowd noise from previous games.
No cardboard cutouts.
Yeah.
Right? If I never see a cardboard cutout again for the rest of my life, I'll be happy.
Some of these NFL games, though, especially there in Kansas City,
it
looks like they're putting in quite a few people.
Yeah, I forget how many they said were there. Like it sounded louder than what they'd said. I think 15,000 people. Like, in other words, the Super Bowl, I think they're allowing 16,000. So that doesn't seem like a lot of people, but I guess compared to a completely empty stadium, there's 16,000 people is 16,000 people, which no matter how you look at it.
How many times did you hear it said by a play-by-play announcer this year? There's only 16,000 people in the stands, but it sounds like 80,000 in here.
And I went to a game. I went to the Clemson and Miami game in Clemson back in October, and they allowed in, I want to say, 19,000 fans. And I had people telling me that watched it on TV that said, Pete, it looked to me as if there was a lot more than 19,000 people, and it sounded that way too. Well, I was there. I think it just looks different on TV, because I could tell you there was nobody within 8 to 10 feet of me in any direction. And that was the same for everybody else there. But I think when you look at it on TV, it just the visual of the way they have them lined in lines and things, I think it gives the appearance that there's more fans there than there really is.
Got Byron saying there's going to be 22,000 in attendance at the Super Bowl.
Okay, well, that's even better then.
Very good. Appreciate everybody stopping by. Many of you, as is often the case, stopped by late, caught the last 10 or 15 minutes. We've got our most highest number of viewers right now. So what you need to do is you just wait for the video to post here in the next 10 or 15 minutes and check out what you missed. Every Monday, noon Eastern time, right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, with Pigskin Pete, of course. Pigskin, what do you got on tap for your channel the next few days?
I will be doing the Lunch Money Show tonight at 10 p.m. from 10 p.m. to midnight with Uncle Lou over on his channel. And, of course, Wednesday and Friday nights, I do my own live call-in show. I take phone calls from all of you fine folks in the comment section. You can call and yell at me. Or we can even actually discuss football, whatever works, whatever you prefer.
I too am here all the time talking college football. You guys know the deal, posting videos and so forth. So just keep it locked in. The best thing that you can do is go subscribe to Pigskin Pete on YouTube. That way you just hit that bell for the notifications. You know when he's dropping new content or going live, and the same here. Pigskin, it's always a pleasure, man. You have a good week.
Yeah, thank you. See you guys, everybody.